With their bitter rival, World Championship Wrestling, taking that next step into the third dimension of gaming with their amazing N64 titles, World Tour and Revenge, the latter remaining one of the greatest pro wrestling games ever made, selling a buttload of copies for the console, it was only a matter of time before the World Wrestling Federation entered the 3D squared circle as well. Unlike the WCW games, though, that were developed by the highly talented folks at the Aki Corporation, a company that had only been around for a few short years, underdogs in the industry that were determined to make a name for themselves, revolutionizing the wrestling game genre from the ground up with their brilliant grappling system that many current wrestling games borrow elements from to this day, the World Wrestling Federation was still stuck in their contract with Acclaim Entertainment, who had held the exclusive rights to all console versions of their games since the release of the NES's WWF WrestleMania in 1989. With the booming success of Aki's WCW vs. the World and WCW vs. NWO World Tour that lasted throughout 1997, the WWF was hoping Acclaim would be able to match it with their next project, which would distance itself from the flashy and fast-paced action of their previous games in favor of a more simulated approach like the Aki games had been delivering. Sculptured Software, renamed Iguana West in late 1997, would remain the sole developer for the title, following their work on WrestleMania the arcade game and In Your House. Being that Iguana had never made a 3D wrestling game before, though, everything had to be built from scratch, which meant that development on this new WWF game was difficult and lengthy. It would miss the release window of 1997, and would not hit store shelves until the summer of 1998. There has been a WWF WWE console game released every year since 1989, so missing a year is a rare occurrence. It has only happened twice as I am recording this, 1997 because of the long development of the first ever 3D WWF game, and in 2021, the result of the WWE 2K fiasco. That's it. Anywho, Acclaim would use parts of the game engine used for another one of their sports titles, NHL Breakaway, to create this new WWF game. It made use of soft skin technology, which allowed its characters to be rendered using models without any seam lines. In its early stages, the game was known as WWF 98 and featured a different ring and arena than what was found in the final product. It had the red, white, and blue ring ropes the WWF had begun phasing out of their programming in early '97, replacing them with all red ropes when they rebranded Monday Night Raw to Raw is War. The visuals looked to be a lot brighter and upbeat in that early version too. The final game was much darker and grittier in appearance, reflecting the recent attitude that had been injected into the WWF's programming at the time. 1997 is arguably one of the greatest years in the WWF, now WWE's, history. They were still losing in ratings to WCW, and it seemed like each week they were experimenting with something new, taking risks, and many of them were paying off. It was must-see TV. The visual presentation of Raw kept changing for the better. You had the amazing Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin matches, the heel Hart Foundation, which dominated the company, possessing all of the championship belts at one point, and fueling that fun USA vs. Canada rivalry. You had the phenomenal build-up to Kane's debut, Undertaker's long-lost brother and horror-inspired monster, and of course, who could forget the first ever Hell in a Cell match at that year's Bad Blood pay-per-view as well. Without beating around the bush any further, the end result of all of Acclaim's efforts was WWF Warzone, released on the Sony PlayStation and Nintendo 64 in 1998. It was the very first 3D wrestling game from the World Wrestling Federation, and the first one released during their highly profitable Attitude Era, when pro wrestling was at its absolute peak of mainstream popularity. Almost everyone seemed to be a wrestling fan back then, watched it on a weekly basis. Unlike the Aki WCW games that revolutionized the wrestling game genre though, sliding into the scene with a bang, Warzone stumbled through the front door, tripped and fell on its face, shit itself, and then passed out. I know this game has its fan base. There are a lot of people that are nostalgic towards it and have very fond memories of it from their childhood. It got relatively decent reviews at the time of its release, and being that it was the WWF's first attempt at making a 3D wrestling game, I should go easy on it, but honestly, I don't really like this game. Warzone is very rough around the edges, it suffers from a lot of growing pains, and I don't think it's all that fun to pick up and play today. I am far more familiar with its sequel, WWF Attitude. I pumped a lot more hours into that one. I think I owned Warzone for a brief period of time when I was younger, played it only a few times on my PS1 with my brother before I traded it in. Hate on Attitude all you want for copying and pasting a lot of the elements from its predecessor, but at least it offered its fair share of new stuff as well. It managed to stay on my game shelf a lot longer than Warzone did. Attitude was just more accessible, in my opinion, more enjoyable, which I know isn't saying much, but still worth saying nonetheless. One positive I will give Warzone, though, is towards its presentation. At the time, this looked pretty damn good. Now, I recorded this footage on my PS3, so it has been upscaled and smoothed out, but I would say the wrestler models in Warzone, even on the source hardware, looked leagues above the N64 WCW games. Their costumes look accurate to what was shown on WWF programming at the time. Each wrestler has two of them in the game, and the move animations, for the most part, are accurate too. The motion capture for them had been done with wrestlers not working for any major wrestling promotions during that period, and while some of them are awkward and don't feel as authentic as they could have been if the wrestlers who performed the actual moves themselves did them, especially the signature moves, some of them like the gut kick and the standing leg drop that automatically homes in on an opponent's neck region, for example, are better and more realistic than almost every other wrestling game I've played. It's astounding. One thing I will say about Warzone and later its sequel Attitude is that I don't think Iguana really paid much attention to the heights of the wrestlers in the games. I think for the engine they were using to work properly, as well as all of the moves, every wrestler had to be the same height, so seeing Kane and Undertaker not towering over some of their opponents is kind of funny to see. In Warzone, there is only one arena, which is pretty disappointing. Having multiple arenas were commonplace in these 3D wrestling games, and the amount in each game would only increase as the years went on, to the point in which players could even create their own. The arena in Warzone isn't even based on any in real life either. I guess it's supposed to be Raw is War. There's a WWF logo visible on the ring apron, a banner with it in the crowd, but there's also this weird gap between the steel guardrail surrounding the ring and the crowd seen further back. The entrance ramp is closed off, and there's this purplish-gray surface used for the ground outside the ring, which I can only assume is concrete. For a game that's trying to simulate reality, this arena looks like none I have ever seen for a WWF event. It's a bizarre design choice by the developers. It's as if these matches are happening in a warehouse somewhere, which I guess makes some sense because the original opening for Raw is War had the wrestlers fighting each other in a warehouse as the music was playing. Moving on to the gameplay of Warzone, this is where it shits the bed, derailing it and several of the other wrestling games Acclaim would release immediately afterwards, that all reused the same grappling system. If we go back to World Tour and Revenge on the N64 for a second, we would know that each wrestler had 12 grapple moves you, as the player, could easily perform from the basic tie-up, depending on how long you held the grab button down beforehand. There were light grapples and strong grapples, and how you did both was shared by every single wrestler in the game. It was universal. Perfect. In Warzone, there are far less moves at your disposal, and the only way to hit grapple moves is by inputting specific button combinations. Most wrestlers have moves assigned to similar sequences: left, right, and then a face button; up, down, and then a face button; left up or left down, and then a face button. And those same interchangeable button combinations are also pressed after initiating a tie-up with circle, when your opponent is stunned in the corner, or lying on the mat to do submission moves near their upper body or lower body. Experimenting to learn a bit of their moves while a match is in play is somewhat manageable, and I find it to be kind of fun, hitting moves out of nowhere you aren't really expecting, but you do get to a point where you need to open the pause menu and look up the rest of them, especially finishing moves, that usually involve pressing 2 face buttons simultaneously at the end of a directional chain. This was something that was thankfully changed in Attitude. Pressing 2 face buttons at once is dog shit. Outside of the finishers though, I actually find the controls in Warzone to be simpler than in Attitude. Most grapple moves and Irish whips can easily be performed in front of your opponent, whereas in Attitude, some of them are stuck behind pressing the tie-up button beforehand. Being more familiar with how Attitude plays, Irish whips took me the longest to get down in Warzone, because I was so used to tying up with the opponent first, and then pressing left X to do one. It took me a while to reprogram my brain again. I hadn't played Warzone in close to 20 years. Something I thought was really cool about this game though that Attitude doesn't feature is the ability to throw your opponent out of the ring with an Irish whip if your back is against the ropes. You can also perform a quick scoop slam over the top rope as well, and have them land on the floor with a nasty bump. They are useful in a pinch when you want to create some distance between you and your opponent. The controls in WWF Warzone and all of Acclaim's wrestling games succeeding it on the PS1 are not as simple and intuitive as the ones found in the legendary Aki N64 games, or the later SmackDown games would be. That's a given, but I also don't think they are as complicated as a lot of people make them out to be as well. I think a lot of people exaggerate when discussing them. The button sequences are nowhere near as painful as some I have encountered in a few fighting games, and like I had mentioned, most wrestlers have moves assigned to similar button combinations. There is a level of universalness to it all, somewhat. I rarely find myself needing to open up the pause menu to look at the move lists. I figure most of them out during the matches, and again, I find it kind of fun to do so. You don't know what moves are assigned to what sequence, and it can be surprising, uncovering them while you play. The only moves I do need to look up are the signatures and finishers, because they typically add in a third direction before you press a face button, making them harder to figure out on their own. But nowadays, that can be done with a simple Google search beforehand. Is it ideal? Should that be necessary to play a wrestling game? Fuck no, but it's better than pausing the game mid-match and ruining your immersion. Something else I do that makes the matches more enjoyable in these Acclaim games is play them on the hardest difficulty setting. That way, while you are figuring out your moves, your opponent is hitting their fair share of moves as well. It prevents the matches from becoming too repetitive with the lack of move variety in these games, with many of the same moves shared between multiple wrestlers. However, there is a flip side to this. Depending on what difficulty you are playing on, it can reduce the damage your moves do, meaning you need to do a lot more of them before putting your opponent away. It isn't much of a problem in the Acclaim games post-Warzone that simplified the wrestlers' health meters, going from green to red, but how the matches in Warzone are structured can make them painfully long to sit through. To win matches, you need to deplete your opponent's health or power meter. It starts off green, but every time you deplete it, your opponent will go into a temporary stunned state, with a separate blue meter that will drain, getting slower and slower as the match goes on. Once the stun meter is gone, another power meter will appear, which you will have to drain until another stun state happens. Rinse and repeat. You continue this process until your opponent's power meter fades from green to yellowish green to orange and then finally red, at which point you can perform a finishing move and achieve victory. I admire the ambition behind this system. It was Iguana's first attempt, but like a lot of things in Warzone, it feels unnecessarily complicated. Like I said, it would become a lot simpler in the following games, pumped out by Acclaim, that gave the wrestlers one health meter that went from green to red. Stunning opponents would also be more spontaneous too, happening at complete random. But yeah, the matches in Warzone specifically can get really exhausting, especially when playing on the hardest difficulty, for the reasons I explained. The game is far too easy without it. Matches can take anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes, which is just insane. Even if you memorized every move in your wrestler's repertoire, the movesets are still extremely limited, and you will see the same moves a nauseating amount of times before your match is through. Thankfully, though, there is another system you can take advantage of that can make the matches end quicker. If you vary your moves up enough, the crowd will start cheering for you, and your name will begin flashing for a limited amount of time. During this period, you receive a damage multiplier. Honestly, it's a pretty cool idea, adds a bit of realism to these matches, and something I wish more wrestling games would try to emulate in some way. I think it's one of the stronger elements these Acclaim wrestling games brought to the table, even if it is a minor one. Looking at the match types in Warzone, it's fairly limited. You have singles matches, which are decided by pinfall, submission, or countout. Weapons matches before the term hardcore had become a thing, which are exactly as they sound. Weapons will be scattered inside and outside the ring. Some are even thrown into the ring by members of the audience. Where the fuck are they getting them from, though? Those bulky TVs especially. Did they bring them with them to the arena? And they must have superhuman strength to throw them that far too. In the weapons matches, there is usually a table in one of the four corners surrounding the ring you can break your opponent through, and I think Warzone was the first wrestling game that let you do this, but I could be wrong. Warzone was the first 3D wrestling game to feature a steel cage match though. It's awkward and inaccurate, however. The ring ropes are just replaced with a cage, and spanning all of their wrestling games on the PS1, Acclaim never fixed its design. Come to think of it, their rings in general were not very accurate. The ring posts weren't attached to the outside corners of the ring, just stabbed through the canvas, which was weird. Tag team matches are here where you must tag in and out with a partner, and the non-legal one has a set amount of time to be in the ring, with the counter for it replenishing while they stand on the ring apron. The AI in these matches is brutal though, far worse and aggressive than in Acclaim's following wrestling games. They enter the ring every time their counter reaches 5 and only leave when it hits 0. You are given barely any time to breathe and wrestle just one opponent. It feels like utter chaos, a tornado tag more than a traditional tag team match. The tag matches drag on forever too, because now you have to deplete 2 opponents' health bars instead of just 1. In multi-man matches like this, and the elimination tornado-style tag matches, there is a reduction made to the polygons and textures to improve the game's performance. It's ugly, and everything still slows down considerably in areas. This wouldn't be as much of a problem in the later acclaimed titles though. The N64 version of Warzone also had a Royal Rumble match, which made use of the game's entire roster. The N64, with its cartridges, was the only console at the time strong enough to load that many wrestlers into a single match without any loading screens or messages in between. One thing I downright despise about Warzone that knocks it down several pegs compared to most other wrestling games is the fact that it does not allow you to choose your opponent in matches, not even tag team ones. You can choose your team, but the other one is completely randomized, so if the partners don't make much sense, tough beans. The whole point of playing a wrestling video game is to book your own matches. They allow you to play through fantasies. That's what makes them so much fun. Having a randomized option would have been fine, and something I think Iguana could have easily implemented, but not allowing the player to choose at all makes zero sense. I don't know how or why they thought this would be a good idea. I guess I should mention that Warzone was the first 3D wrestling game to offer a creator wrestler mode, where you could, for all intents and purposes, customize a wrestler from scratch. There are limited options, but for being the first one, it's halfway decent. I can't be too critical of it. Creator Wrestler is a mode I used a lot when I was a kid, but one I don't utilize anymore in wrestling games, so I'm not going to be going into them moving forward in my wrestling game retrospective series. I hope that doesn't bother too many of you. Finally, let's move on to the roster and the main story mode option in Warzone. The game was released in 1998, but factoring in development time, as it is with all of these wrestling games, it really acts as a time capsule reflecting the product in the year prior to its release, in this case, 1997. There are 18 wrestlers in the game, not including some of the unlockable ones that aren't real wrestlers, or are variations on the default ones. I don't count those. The roster in Warzone was quite outdated by the time it came out in the summer of '98. Bret Hart had left the WWF for WCW, following the infamous Montreal Screwjob at Survivor Series the previous November. Fellow Hart Foundation member British Bulldog would follow him in protest. Ahmed Johnson also left the World Wrestling Federation in February of 1998 due to personal matters, and would eventually make his way to World Championship Wrestling as well. Goldust was also in this game, but by the time of its release, Dustin Runnels had become the artist formerly known as Goldust, a reference to the musician Prince, and throughout 1998 began to mimic celebrities and other wrestlers. In the months leading up to Warzone coming out, he had also burned his Goldust costume, and declared himself a born-again Christian, though he returned as Goldust by the end of the year. Shawn Michaels had been forced to retire following his WWF title match against Stone Cold at WrestleMania 14 due to a serious back injury he had sustained in a casket match against The Undertaker at the 1998 Royal Rumble. HBK would be featured in a few more wrestling games moving forward, like WWF Attitude, SmackDown 2 Know Your Role, and in the Aki titles on the N64, but this was the last time he was in a game as an active competitor until his return in 2002. Okay, so the primary mode in Warzone is called WWF Challenge Mode. In it, you play a series of matches against a random selection of 12 wrestlers to win the major singles titles in the WWF, the Intercontinental Championship, and then the World Championship. For Challenge Mode, I played as Mankind, mostly because, by beating his on the hardest difficulty, you unlock both Cactus Jack and Dude Love. For my IC title match, I was pitted against the Big Red Machine Kane, and for my world title match, it was against Ken Shamrock. As you play through your matches, other ones will be taking place off-screen, so the ordering of the wrestlers you face will constantly be changing. When you win each championship, your wrestler just stands in the ring awkwardly as a ring girl walks around you holding up your belt. You then see yourself on the cover of WWF magazine. I will give the game credit, the belts look pretty accurate, for PS1 standards that is. After every few matches, you will be forced to face a previously defeated wrestler seeking revenge against you for their loss. Before these grudge matches, you get to watch a recorded promo from the real-life wrestler speaking directly to you, which is neat. Some of them tried really hard to make it authentic, while others are extremely awkward, with the performer stumbling over lines or reading directly from a script in front of them. The grudge matches will usually be specialty match types like weapons or a steel cage. Throughout challenge mode, the wrestlers will walk to the ring with these crude entrance sequences. Unfortunately, they only appear in challenge mode. I don't know why they weren't implemented in the rest of the game. It would have boosted its overall presentation. Vince McMahon and Jim Ross provide commentary for Warzone during matches, and even deliver introductions for each of the wrestlers competing. Apparently, they recorded over an hour of dialogue for the game, and honestly, it's fucking great. Some of the best in any wrestling game, in my opinion. So much emotion and inflection in their voices. They don't sound like robots reading off a script like in today's wrestling games.
Welcome to the War Zone. This capacity crowd is on their feet. Hello, everyone. I'm Vince McMahon.
And I'm good old JR.
What a matchup this will be.
Steve Austin is one of the most dangerous men in the WWF today.
Whether you like him or you hate him, you have to admire the guts of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Bret Hart is a 5-time WWF champion and leader of the Hart Foundation.
He's done it all in the WWF.
I think the fans will be getting their money's worth tonight.
Against the ropes.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
On to WWF Attitude. This game suffers from a lot of the same shortcomings as Warzone, but I do think with the limited improvements it does make, it is the more enjoyable title of the two. It's still not a great wrestling game, but there is some halfway decent entertainment that can be found with it, if you know where to look. The presentation in Attitude is upped a little bit from what we saw in Warzone. Wrestlers now have full entrances where they walk down to the ring from the stage, deliver their signature taunts, with some even having unique lighting when they get to the ring too. Wrestler movements look very unnatural and robotic though, like they're depressed, sulking, and don't want to be there. Stone Cold walks like he shit himself, and the way Kane steps over the top rope almost looks sexual. It's bizarre. The pay-per-view and house show arenas have a flat entranceway and ramp to them, but if you are in the Raw is War one, it has a set of stairs the wrestlers walk down. This was never a thing in the WWF, to my knowledge. The only event I can recall having stairs from its stage was WCW's Sold Out in 1997, and they were just as awkward and unnecessary as the ones here. Instead of having the announcers provide an introduction for wrestlers before every match like in Warzone, the wrestlers themselves do, dishing out insults to their opponents. Some of them are really good, some are downright cringy and have not aged well at all, and a few, like Kane's, can be pretty inaudible because he was still speaking through that creepy voice box at the time. Match commentary is provided by Jerry Lawler and Shane McMahon in Attitude. Shane had just started doing commentary for Sunday Night Heat and had replaced Jim Ross in the game due to Ross being unable to record his lines due to a bout with Bell's palsy that had him written off TV at the time. The announcing duo in this game get pretty annoying rather quickly. The team is nowhere near as strong as Vince and JR were in Warzone. Unlike the N64 Aki games, Warzone did not feature blood, aside from the odd spraying you would see from the mouths of the wrestlers when they were hit with foreign objects. In Attitude, though, it's a fucking bloodbath. You can bleed basically anywhere. The face, ears, back of the head, chest, shoulders, forearms. It's ridiculous. The bleeding is spontaneous, which I always prefer in wrestling games. With the Aki titles, it felt special, because not every match would have it happen, but here, if you have it on, you can't get through a single match without someone bleeding from multiple orifices. There's so much blood that it becomes unrealistic, and when you play as women wrestlers, I think they bleed as well, which is unnerving to see, though to record those matches, I turned blood off just in case, so maybe they don't. Either way, Acclaim should have scaled back a little with the blood. It's too much, and loses all of its flair. On top of an improved Create a Wrestler mode, the addition of Create a Stable and Create a Pay-Per-View, before each match you play, you can edit a stadium, changing the lights, rope, and ring post colors, add different event logos to the ring apron and stage signs. It was like a very primitive version of Create an Arena that would be featured in later wrestling games, and it's one of my favorite aspects of WWF Attitude, and the following wrestling games Acclaim would release on the PlayStation. There are only 3 different kinds of arenas in these games, the one for the televised events, the one for the house shows, and the standard PPV one, but being able to freely customize the colors and logos and everything to them was quite impressive, ahead of its time really. Crowds were also animated in Attitude Now too. In Warzone, they were all just static. The number of match types available in Attitude was greatly expanded upon from its predecessor. There's a nice variety to them and should keep you engaged for far longer. You have singles matches, tag teams, tornadoes, and handicaps, either 1-on-2 or 1-on-3. Lumberjack matches let you place 2 wrestlers ringside that can grab and pull you or your opponent outside for a beatdown. There are singles and tag gauntlets, where you take on 4 consecutive opponents or teams, with your health carrying over from each one. There are triple threats with 3 wrestlers that are one fall to a finish, triangles or 4-man war matches that have elimination rules, stable matches that have 4 competitors in the ring at once, each part of 4-man teams. When one is defeated, another one of their teammates come out until every wrestler is gone. The classic Survivor Series tag team match, though only 2 members of each team are in the ring at once until eliminations occur due to console limitations, and your standard Battle Royals and the Royal Rumble, which I believe, for the first time in a WWF game, actually had 30 wrestlers in it, or more, because the game's roster was big enough to accommodate it. It beat WrestleMania 2000 to the punch by only a few short months. King of the Ring also makes an appearance in Attitude as its own separate mode. You choose the participants and then can play or simulate the matches in an arena of your choice. And I haven't even touched base on all of the match modifiers you can use in this game as well, making them hardcore, falls count anywhere, last man standing, steel cages, submission, knockout, 2 out of 3 falls, Iron Man, finisher to win, or first blood. There are so many match options in this game, very plentiful for the time, but also kind of overwhelming. In all the years I've owned this game, I still don't think I've played every combination. Not that I'd really want to either. Some can be really fun, while others not so much, not with this gameplay. The repetitive and tiring challenge mode from Warzone has been replaced with a more expanded yet equally repetitive career mode. You choose a WWF wrestler and make your way up the rankings to win the European, Intercontinental, and World titles. You wrestle at house shows, then shotgun Saturday night, get your chance on the main roster on Monday Night Raw, and compete at monthly pay-per-views. The career mode in Attitude is very very shallow. There aren't any storylines or anything, just a straightforward series of matches, but the match variety in the game does help, and the mode itself isn't complete garbage. What's garbage is that Acclaim never tried to improve on it moving forward, but I'll talk all about it in a later retrospective on their ECW games. Oh boy. Playing through career mode unlocks hidden content like additional wrestlers. WWF Attitude boasts a much larger roster than in Warzone at 40, technically 43 if you count the Cactus Jack and Dude Love-Attires for Mankind, and the inclusion of Al Snow's loyal companion head, which is just a floating mannequin head with hands and feet. The game came out in 1999, but the roster and overall presentation of Attitude reflects the WWF circa 1998. A lot of the major stables present on TV at the time are here, like D-Generation X, the Nation of Domination, and the presence of Undertaker's heel faction, the Ministry of Darkness, and the McMahon family's corporation are felt as well. Attitude also marked the one and only time Mark Mero, Kurgan of the Oddities, and Dr. Death Steve Williams made an appearance in a WWF video game. The most noteworthy member of the roster, though, unfortunately, is Owen Hart, who died a few months before the game's release at the Over the Edge pay-per-view in May of 1999, without question the biggest tragedy in the history of professional wrestling. WWF Attitude was initially set to release in June of '99, but was pushed back as a result of the accident. The developers switched Owen from a heel to a face in the game, added in a dedication screen to him following the game's opening cutscene, and removed all references to his blue blazer superhero gimmick, the nature of which led to his untimely death. Playing as Owen in this game is bittersweet. He was an amazing in-ring performer. I didn't appreciate him as much as I should have when I was younger. Watching back a lot of his matches, promos, and heelish little quirks, the guy was a genius, one of the best ever. The kind of heel you despise, but also smile at the same time, because of how much fun they're clearly having doing it. It's kind of nice that you can play as Owen in Attitude, the last video game he was in, at least produced by the WWF, now WWE, but there is no denying that the tragedy surrounding his death looms over this game and does affect your enjoyment of it in areas. After all, if it weren't for the unbelievable levels of negligence and incompetence, he would still be with us today. Thinking about all of it leaves a sour taste in your mouth. Anywho, moving away from all that, gameplay-wise, like I had mentioned earlier, the pacing of matches in Attitude is greatly improved from what was in Warzone. Health meters have been simplified, wrestlers only have one of them now that turns from green to red, and stun states seem to occur at complete random. The controls in Attitude are virtually identical to Warzone. You still have to input button combinations to do moves, but the finishers are not as complicated to execute, and there are more common grapples added in, which are universal across the entire roster, like body slams, vertical suplexes, hip tosses, full Nelsons, and wrist locks and hammer locks that can be performed from a tie-up. If your opponent is in a stunned state, you can pick them up in a scoop slam and throw them over the top rope. This is only really useful in the new lumberjack matches, to have the wrestlers outside the ring attack your opponent, or in the Royal Rumble to eliminate the other competitors. Being able to control where to slam your opponent was ahead of its time though. Without sounding too pretentious, it was the very early framework for what would become ultimate control moves in the SmackDown vs. Raw series down the road, but I'm probably giving Acclaim too much credit there by saying that. It actually made me sick to my stomach a little. I apologize. Something I have been holding off in saying until this late in the video, though, is the fact that while the animations in these acclaimed wrestling games are acceptable, the presentation is okay, some of the additional creation elements I've brought up are kinda cool, and even the shitty controls become manageable with practice and patience, you can only give them so much praise, because functionally, as wrestling games, how their bell-to-bell action plays out, they aren't all that fun for longer than like 30 minutes. Matches have very little drama to them. None of them are gonna be 5-star classics. Their movesets are very limited, and you'll be seeing the same animations over and over and over again. Hitting your finisher or locking your opponent in a submission when they are in the red is basically a guaranteed victory. There isn't a whole lot of strategy to any of it. Everything is just so bare bones that it becomes boring after a while. Warzone and Attitude can be entertaining in short spurts. I have fun playing them occasionally. They were the first two 3D wrestling games produced by the WWF, now WWE, so they're significant from a historical viewpoint alone. But as wrestling games, they are nowhere near the best in the genre, nor would I label them underrated in any meaningful way. For me, what makes a wrestling game good, or at least halfway decent, is how the matches in them play. If you can have good ones that make an attempt at emulating the excitement and back and forth action of the real thing. With Warzone, Attitude, and Acclaim's ECW games later, I don't think they accomplish this. Their gameplay is just too bland, too repetitive. Matches in them are just never all that enjoyable. Acclaim's lengthy and grueling licensing deal with the World Wrestling Federation would finally come to an end following the release of WWF Attitude. The WWF would then sign a new deal with THQ, which led to the creation of more N64 titles developed by Aki, WrestleMania 2000, and the iconic No Mercy. Not to mention, THQ's SmackDown series on the PlayStation was just around the corner as well. Things were definitely looking up for the promotion in the realm of video games. Some of the greatest of all time were on the horizon. This has been NerdGasm. I want to thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you have been enjoying my wrestling game retrospective series thus far. If you'd like to support my channel and ensure the continued creation of its content in all its forms, please subscribe, hit that bell icon for notifications, share my videos to anyone you know who would enjoy them too, and become a producer over on Patreon if you can. I will see you all in the next one. Take care, and always stay nerdy.